Welcome everyone to the round 2016. And before we get started, by the way, I'm not new here, but I'm a professor in the department specializing in evidence-based practice. The announcement I want to make is that I'm pleased to announce the establishment of the Wayne J. Caton Outstanding Mentor Award. This prestigious award acknowledges the time, dedication, and attention that faculty members devote to foster the career development and academic success of colleagues and trainees in the areas of research, clinical practice, and education. The award allows the department to honor and celebrate the award. One recipient per year will be selected. The award recipient will be recognized at the department faculty meeting on June 13th, 2016. Nominations will open in mid-February, and details about the nomination and selection process will be provided on the department website. And speaking of mentoring, I'm pleased to introduce to you all Dr. Mitchell Feldman, who's the Vice Provost for Faculty Mentoring at the University of California, San Francisco, and Fulbright awardee. Dr. Feldman is an expert in faculty member mentoring, and also in the area. People really dedicate his time and efforts to the development of mentoring programs to help junior faculty, new faculty advance in their careers. An expert in global health disparities. I've done management medicine when I was at UCSF. He is the recipient. And today he's going to talk to you about a very creative and innovative program in faculty mentoring he developed at UCSF and the many successful outcomes which this program has produced. So pleased to introduce you and welcome Feldman.
Thank you. I ironically know Pat much better than most of you probably, having had the pleasure of working with her for many years at UCSF. And all I can say is how lucky you are to have gotten her to come up here to UW to work with you. She'll be a terrific asset. So if you haven't met Pat, I encourage you to reach out to her one at a time, not all of us. Thank you, Pat. So it's a pleasure to be here. And what a wonderful way to start my talk by announcing the Wayne Caton Mentoring Award. I did know Wayne somewhat peripherally, but somewhat through my work in depression and primary care. And what a nice way to honor him, and what a nice way to really try to help catalyze mentorship and the importance of mentorship in the department by creating this award. I'll talk a little bit more about recognition of mentorship and the importance of that in terms of changing the culture to really try to create and promote and support a culture of mentorship. But what a nice way to introduce my talk. So that's nice timing. Thank you. Here's a brief, I've told I can't move, so I'm going to try not to, as I usually like to wander. But I know there are folks listening somewhere else, and so I will try not to move. Pat will direct me back in here. I do apologize. I'm fighting some sort of upper respiratory something, so I have water here, and if I make unpleasant noises, it has nothing to do with you. It's just it's my URI. So here's just a brief outline of what I'm going to cover. One is why mentoring and what is the evidence. We can spend an hour going over a lot of single-site cross-sectional studies. In a way, I'm going to ask you to just sort of take my word for it. Mentoring matters and it's important. I encourage you to focus on it. I think you're already there, but I'll show you a couple of slides on that. Spend a little bit more time talking about what is this thing we call mentoring and how is it different from coaching or teaching or counseling or other kinds of professional relationships. And then the last 15 minutes or so talking about what we've done at UCSF in terms of how, again, trying to help create and promote a culture of mentorship there. And I hope to leave some time for questions and answers at the end. I did see this very stern note on the wall there that says meetings end 10 minutes before the hour. Is that really true? No. Okay. So at 10 minutes before the hour, we'll hopefully have some time for some Q&A. So there's this oldish systematic review that found an association between having a mentor and career guidance and career choice. Actually, it takes very little face time, as it turns out. There's a study from Harvard that looked at mentorship for internal medicine residents trying to decide on career and subspecialty or not. And 1 or 2 meetings over the course of the residency seem to make a difference in terms of helping them sort out career paths versus not. This is for students and trainees and residents. Retention and recruitment of faculty important, certainly around equity and inclusion. Mentorship is found to play a very important role. And getting stuff done, productivity of students and faculty, and focusing on junior faculty, since I think that's going to be the focus, at least initially, of your mentorship initiatives in the department. Increased publications and research productivity, grants, improved research skills, improved academic leadership skills, increased understanding of academic values, increased satisfaction with one's work life, all seem to be associated with those who have mentorship versus those who do not. And in research, and there's Pat, they're a second author on this paper, one of the many projects we collaborated on. This was a cross-section of the study at UCSF around when we were launching our mentoring program. And there were some faculty who already had mentors and those who did not. But those who had mentors, we found, had greater academic self-efficacy. So if faculty reported they had a mentor, they had more confidence that they knew what they needed to do to get promoted at UCSF. That's the academic self-efficacy piece. And then higher satisfaction with time allocation at work. So they're primarily clinician teachers, and they were in a mentoring relationship. They were satisfied with how they were spending their time. Mainly researchers, they were more satisfied than those without mentors. Okay, so that's all on the evidence, and I think there's now, in the last 5 years or so, been scores of more studies that have come out that have really underscored the importance of mentorship in academic health sciences settings. Let's talk a little bit about what is mentoring. Notice, by the way, there's a bunch of photos in there from my time in Japan. Pat mentioned the Fulbright year. I spent a year there in Kyoto, at Kyoto University as a Fulbright scholar, actually studying mentorship and academic medicine in a Japanese context. Pretty interesting stuff, which maybe we'll talk about later. So what is mentoring? Here's a somewhat lengthy, there's a lot of definitions out there. I kind of like this one. I'll read the full thing to you and then let's break it down, because I think there's some important components. So mentoring is a reciprocal and collaborative learning relationship between 2 or more individuals who share mutual responsibility and accountability for helping a mentee work toward achievement of clear and mutually defined learning goals. Okay. So here's the first piece of it: reciprocal and collaborative learning relationship. Reciprocal and collaborative. So like all relationships, mentorship, perhaps different from teaching or coaching or counseling, there's an expectation that there be some sense of reciprocity in that relationship. So part of the job of both the mentor and the mentee is to either discuss overtly, or for the mentor to reflect on and the mentee to reflect on what's in this relationship for the mentor, if this is going to be a longitudinal relationship. Part of it is this collaborative piece is the mentee's responsibility to form a mentoring team. And when we started under the auspices of our Clinical Translational Science Institute, started setting up a mentor development program, a training program, which I'll tell you more about later. One of the first things we did was kind of step back and say, what do we mean by a mentor? Aren't there sort of different roles and responsibilities here? And came up with these 3 sort of types: research or scholarly mentor, career mentor, and co-mentor. The research or scholarly mentor is, as it sounds, someone who will help the mentee get products done, whether it be scholarship of discovery in a more traditional research mentoring relationship, or scholarship of integration that might be true for folks in the clinician-teacher pathway, or producing curricula, writing chapters, or things like that. The career mentor is a very important mentor that sometimes is left out, even for those who have robust research mentoring relationships. This is the mentor who's going to help advise and guide that mentee on their career path. The frequency of meetings is probably going to be much less than a research mentor, but the importance of the meetings are great. So one or two or three times a year to review the CV, to review an individual development plan, which I'll talk about later, and to help, again, guide that mentee on their path. Meetings may be more frequent at times of decision-making or crises or other issues like that. And then the co-mentor is part of the mentoring team. In a research context, we'll bring in maybe the biostatistician on the team. I'm calling them a mentor rather than an advisor because they still have kind of skin in the game, so to speak. They're concerned about the long-term career trajectory of that mentee, but the intensity of the meetings, the frequency of the meetings are going to be less than with that research mentor for sure. And then there's advisors and peer mentors who are very important. We had a nice discussion this morning with some folks from the department talking about how there's already been a number of peer mentoring groups that have been set up in the department that have been extremely helpful to help faculty in a number of ways in their careers. So speaking of peer mentoring and part of this team that mentees wanted, and by the way, this is mentee-centered mentoring. So I put the mentee in the center of this intentionally. Perhaps as a general internist, I like to think about like patient-centered care. This is mentee-centered mentoring with the arrows going both ways, again, kind of underscoring this sense of reciprocity and collaboration between the mentee and these other mentors, and hopefully, although the arrows are a little bit less bright there, between the various mentors as well, who may also be communicating amongst each other. But the key to connect all of this, particularly for a junior faculty, is the mentee. So here's another little photo from Japan. This is a roof of the Imperial Palace in Kyoto, where the emperor lived for, I don't know, 1,000 years probably before moving to Tokyo, about 200 years ago. And I show this because the Japanese have this nice idea, I think, of thinking about peer mentorship, of getting mentoring from someone just one or two roof tiles up from you on this very steep and slippery roof. And you try to get mentoring too high up, particularly in a more hierarchical kind of society, you may slip and fall off that roof. So think about the importance of peer mentorship or near peer mentorship, someone one roof tile up or at the same level as you, as being an important piece of this sort of mentoring portfolio or mentoring team. So the other piece of this is who share mutual responsibility and accountability. This is this idea of mentee-centered mentoring. It's a quote from Judy Zerzan in Colorado, who said, "The mentee is not an empty vessel receiving the mentor's advice and wisdom, but rather an active participant shaping the relationship." So again, sometimes in our setting, mentoring relationships don't work, not because there's any malignant relationship issues or anything negative going on. They just sort of dissolve. There's sort of a lack of clarity around communication, which I'll get to in a moment. And we have to put the responsibility somewhere. It's on both sides of the equation, but you really want to think about one of the core competencies of an effective mentee is learning how to effectively manage up in that relationship. And finally, share mutual responsibility and accountability for helping a mentee work toward achievement of clear and mutually defined learning goals. Clear and mutually defined learning goals. And this is this whole very important concept of alignment in mentoring. So just like with this bridge, if you don't have alignment, you really can't get anywhere. If you don't have alignment in a mentoring relationship, it's not going to work. And this is often kind of the hidden reason why mentoring relationships are not successful. How does one get or promote alignment in mentoring relationships? I'll get there in a second, but usually an individual development plan, and I'll talk about that in a moment. How many of you are familiar with an IDP or an individual development plan? I knew you would be, Deborah. Most of you not. Interesting. I think this is going to be, if you make one change in how you approach mentoring, I will encourage all of you to try to integrate that into your mentoring relationships. I'll talk more about that in a second. But how do you know if there's misalignment or malalignment in a mentoring relationship? Here's just a couple of things. The mentee or mentor dreads mentoring meetings. Have you ever felt like that? Mentor does not respond to emails or doesn't find the time to meet. Mentee is not following through on deadlines. The mentor does most of the talking and direction setting during the mentoring meeting, or the mentee and mentor avoid each other, right? You see your mentor down the hallway, you then you duck into the closet before he or she gets to you, right? That's really not a good sign. But this sense of alignment, or trying to promote alignment, I can't emphasize that enough in terms of promoting success. And again, the individual development plan is the way to try to do that. Some have called it the career compass. It helps to set direction and to set along the way these clear, defined, measurable goals. So for those of you not familiar with an IDP, we could spend 2 hours, and you would need at least a 2 or 3 hour kind of workshop to go through what is an IDP, what are the components, how do you use it effectively in a mentoring relationship, etc. And Pat or someone in the future, Deborah, can help maybe pull that together. I think that would be helpful. And even if you don't like it and don't want to use it, for those of you who are research mentors, you're going to have to figure out how to do so. Because NIH has drunk the IDP Kool-Aid, and they're now requiring individual development plans or some form of, they're not saying you need to do it this way, but they're saying you need to have some sort of written IDP as part of many now career development awards. So figure it out, because you're going to be asked to do it, and I think actually it's a good thing. What's an IDP? It's both a process and a product. Okay, the process is this purposeful goal setting between the mentor and the mentee. First, work on the mentee's end. Where do I want to go with my career, and how do I get there? What are the knowledge and skills that I may need that I don't have now? And how do I acquire that knowledge and skills so that I can accomplish what I want to accomplish? And how does my mentor help me figure out how to get what I need so that I can move forward in my career? The process, and then the product is this written document, this IDP, electronically, keep it on your desktop, print it out, put it on the back of an envelope if that's the way you like to work, or on a napkin, and when you're meeting with your mentee, when you're having coffee. But put it down somewhere, and that document answers these questions. Where am I headed with? Really, the first question is, what's important to me? Where do I want to go? And then where am I headed with my career, and how will I get there? So it's a process of self-reflection on the part of the mentee, goal setting, sharing that with the mentor, and then there's an iterative process where, of course, this gets refined. And I'd suggest, every 4 to 6 months, probably more than once a year and less than, every month, to kind of revisit that and see how you're doing mentor and mentee. And this helps to align the goals and expectations between the two. So you don't look up 2 or 3 years later and go, oh, whoops, I thought I was mentoring you in this direction, and you thought you were heading in this direction with your career, and you're coming up for a promotion in a year, and oh my God, we didn't do what we meant to do. This is one very complex IDP. I showed you. I think it's in many ways more relevant for those of you who are engaged in more basic science careers. This was developed at UCSF. It's open access. You can go to My IDP and you can click on that. It has a very involved set of questions, again, self-assessment about one's skills and knowledge, and then an action plan about how to acquire those, and goal setting, etc. So this is kind of the ultimate version of an IDP. We have many others on our faculty mentoring program website at UCSF, or our Clinical Translational Science Institute website at UCSF, and you're welcome to borrow them. You can make up your own, and that will work for you and your mentees or mentors. Let's talk some about mentoring roles, and it's often in the eye of the beholder, right? What we call and define a mentoring relationship. And I gave a talk yesterday, and someone said, "I think I've been doing this for years, but I've never called it mentoring. We've not defined it in that way." And I think it's important to explicitly define it, and to define not only that this is mentoring, but what kind of mentoring, and what are the expectations that you have of me in this relationship. Is this a career mentoring relationship? Are you expecting me to K award, and you're going to need access to me maybe weekly for the next 6 months, etc.? Because again, this is where we run into problems when we have lack of clarity around what are the roles and expectations on both sides. So let's tease out a few of these mentoring roles. Classically, there's clearly an overlap with teaching. I think mentoring is distinct from teaching, and it has its own set of knowledge and skills and competencies, but there's clearly an overlap. At basic level, mentors educate mentees, educate them about research content, clinical teaching skills, professional values and behaviors, and again, in a career mentoring relationship, or maybe all of them, ultimately about how to succeed in this chosen career path. This very first mentoring relationship, I think, illustrates the teaching aspect of mentoring. I dug this up in the annals of the ancient annals of mentoring, and as there, now I've taught you everything I know about splitting rocks. And so this is literally sort of the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next, although I think this guy's a lousy mentor. These rocks look exactly the same to me. And what you want to do is really mentor your mentee to independence, split it slightly differently than the way you split it. There's mentors as role models. It's a very important role, more passive, right? Like those of you who are parents know that you're observed closely by your particularly adolescent kids, but they usually don't listen to what you're saying anymore. And your mentees are also doing that, observing what you do very carefully. You're role modeling for them. It's one study that just came out that actually said that of all the roles that a mentor may play, that if the mentee identifies the mentor as a role model, they're more likely to be satisfied or happy in their professional life than they may be productive with these other roles, but in terms of satisfaction, the role modeling piece is key. This is a nice quote from Atul Gawande. I'm sure all of you have read his stuff in one form or another, where he said, I've been a surgeon for 8 years. For the past couple of them, my performance in the operating room has reached a plateau. I'd like to think it's a good thing. I've arrived at my professional peak, but mainly it seems as if I've just stopped getting better. Gawande didn't use a term mentorship, but I think an important role of that coach, mentor, coach is to help us continue to improve and look for ways to improve and get better in our professional lives. There's the most dramatic role of the mentor, which is mentor as superhero. This is just an illustration of the fact that I spend way too much time Googling the term mentor and come up with Marvel Comics actually has mentor as superhero. A nice tagline for that: mentor is a member of an unidentified alien race who possess vast intelligence. But in all seriousness, this is, I think, a very important role for a mentor in all settings, so that of protector and advocate. So the term protege actually comes from protegere, or to protect, someone who that mentee can feel comfortable going to when they're feeling vulnerable or need protection, as we all do from time to time in our professional lives. And on the positive end of things, to advocate for that mentee, to put them up for awards, to say, I'm invited to go to this professional meeting on this committee. I think it would be a great opportunity for you. I'm going to suggest that you go in my place, and to help push forward your mentee and pull yourself back. That's the generativity piece of mentoring. And I think the reason why so many of us are in academic jobs, to be able to do that for our mentees. And finally, there's this role of the mentor as advisor and guide. This is a Sufi image, but you'll notice and the arrows go both ways here, the sense of reciprocity and communication going on in the mentoring relationship. I think this is a key role for a mentor, and that is of a trusted counselor or guide as defined by the Oxford English Dictionary. And it's an opportunity, probably the only opportunity we have in our professional lives and professional relationships, to practice self-reflection and value clarification. At least once a year, step back, take a walk in the woods, up Mount Rainier, which I still haven't seen, but I know is out there somewhere, and to think about why you're doing this work, what's important to you, how do you want to make a difference, why you're working here and not seeing patients if you're a clinician, teacher, or a clinician at Group Health or Kaiser, or doing research somewhere else. Why are you doing this job? And this should be part of the substance, and what's important to you on a personal level. And to bring in your personal and professional values to that career mentoring relationship, to that trusted career mentor, to then make choices about how you want to spend your time and how you want to live your life. So the career mentoring is an opportunity for mentees to ask fundamental questions. Where am I most irreplaceable? Why did I choose my profession? What would I like my life to be like in 3, 5, 10 years? I'm sure I know for me, and I suspect if I ask most of the senior folks here, have you ever actually followed your 5 and 10 year plan? Everyone would say no. because part of the joy, I think, and the challenge of an academic job is that it presents you with opportunities, and part of the role of the mentor then is to help you take some risks and be entrepreneurial, maybe figure out how to reinvent yourself every 5 to 10 years to take a slightly different path to keep your job more active. And if a little bit of uncertainty is not for you, you're in the wrong place, right? You want to be in another environment. But that's the fun, I think, and challenge and excitement of being in an academic setting. But it's important to set those goals. It kind of helps keep you, it gives you a compass. It sets a direction for you, and at least in the short term helps you get stuff done. And then to define your values, what's important to you, why are you doing this work, and then from that, choices. Another picture from Japan. This is from one of my favorite gardens there. Kind of tickled me because usually they tell you exactly where to go when you're in these gardens in Japan. This was this way, and my wife and I came to this beautiful fork, and like most of us, right, we only have good choices, but we do have choices to make. So your career mentor will help you decide which beautiful garden path you want to go down, and you'll enjoy the hike. This has come up in some of the conversations. I thought one slide in here about, because this harkens back to values, which is we all bring a certain set of assumptions, often implicit assumptions or implicit biases maybe, into our relationships. And one way this plays out is in generational differences in mentoring. And I've certainly noticed this in my relationships. We have, I don't know, I won't ask you to identify yourselves, but I'm sure we have a few baby boomers in the room. And I think those of us from that generation carry a certain set of values with us that is somewhat maybe stereotypically exemplified by this sort of middle-aged white guy carrying the briefcase climbing up a ladder here. My apologies to all you middle-aged white guys. And kind of this image of this is success. There's one way up, you climb the ladder, there may be somebody sort of stepping on your fingers there, and you better not get off, because if you do, you're going to start back at the bottom again, or you may not even get back on. You pay your, I remember actually this is not necessarily a male thing. One of my mentors when I was junior faculty at UCSF, very successful female faculty member, was like, you want to be successful here, buddy? You get up at 5 in the morning, Monday through Friday, and write. That, because don't expect anybody to give you any time during the week to do that. I didn't do that. It worked out okay. But it scared the daylights out of me. Is that what it takes? That she had an image of what it takes to be successful. It worked for her. I think we need to be more, first of all, we need to be aware of whatever biases it is we may have when we're interacting with mentees and mentors. It's on both sides. And be aware of that so it doesn't interfere. So we're going, oh, why doesn't my mentee understand that they got to pay their dues before they can get that promotion or get that job or whatever? It's like, oh, I'm kind of bringing my own sense of my own history and my own bias here, as opposed to this other way. This is from Sheryl Sandberg's book. I'm sure some of you have read the Lean In book, and she used, instead of the ladder, the jungle gym metaphor about success, which I think is much more appropriate, probably always was, but certainly now generationally for the Gen X, the Ys, the millennials, and whoever we have now, in terms of there are many different ways to get there. You can go sideways and you can still continue going up. You may go sideways for a while, decide that you're going to do something else. You can have children or whatever it is. Maybe, go sideways and then you go up. There are other people there who can actually give you a hand and help you up rather than step on your fingers, etc. You get the metaphor. But I think it's a nicer way of kind of conceptualizing or thinking about career development than this sort of ladder of success. A key competency of mentoring, of mentors, is simply listening. And I think if there's one mistake that I've seen more senior mentors, all mentors make, they talk too darn much. So if you're mentoring and you hear your voice more than your mentee's voice, so if you're a mentee and you leave the meeting and it's like, oh, he or she did all the talking, there's a problem in that relationship, because the key role is actively listening and reflecting back. You guys should be the experts in that. I'm sort of preaching to the choir, but you want to keep that in mind with your mentor. And that also means that when you're sitting down to have a mentoring meeting, you close your computer, you focus. You get rid of distractions. You really put your energy into it, whether it's a 15-minute meeting or a 90-minute meeting. Shaw said the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I think we can all relate to that, right? We're busy, the multitasking, etc., thinking about a million different things while we're having a conversation. Try not to do that when you're mentoring. And I love this, again, from my time in Japan, although this is an old, I don't know, any of you can read the kanji or the old Chinese character. This is the character for listen. And like so many of these characters, they so beautifully summarize this concept of active listening in one picture. So this is made up of ears and eyes, full attention, and one heart. So to actively listen is to use your ears and your eyes with full attention and one heart. All right, let's talk some about a culture of mentorship, because I think that's what you want to create here in the university. But let's just start with the department. How do you create that? How do you nurture and support that? And again, as I said, one beautiful way is through this award that Pat announced at the beginning. So what have we done at UCSF over the last really 10 years now? I've been working on this for almost a decade at UCSF. We had a sense that our faculty were quite dissatisfied with the climate around mentorship at UC, as Pat will remember, and our chancellor actually did something about that, created my position, put some resources behind it, and created a faculty mentoring program and a variety of other things that I'll tell you about. And we have moved the dial. We did another climate survey about 10 years later, about 6 or 7 years into my program, and satisfaction around access to mentorship, quality of mentorship, support for career development, all of that good stuff went up dramatically for faculty at that time. I presume there's a cause and effect relationship there, but I can only claim association in terms of the research piece. So let me tell you about these components of the mentorship culture at UC. One is the faculty mentoring program. This is a program that's targeting all assistant professors. We have 5, I know you've got like 3 tracks, I think, now in your department. We have 5 series. This is for everybody, whether they're primarily clinical, primarily research, MDs, PhDs, etc. They want them at least 50% time so that they're kind of committed to their career there. And this is for medicine, dentistry, nursing, and pharmacy as well as a health sciences campus. We have about 900 target mentees last year with about 90% paired. I do this by appointing mentoring facilitators or having the chair appoint mentoring facilitators in each of the departments or divisions who are responsible for kind of overseeing the pairing process, and then ask the departments or divisions to supply me with their data. The focus has been on career mentoring, because that's kind of the common mentorship that everybody needs to be successful in an academic job. Some faculty are going to have several other mentors and hopefully establish this mentoring team, as I referred to earlier. Some may have mainly that career mentor and not much else, and some peer mentorship. That's okay, but at least they need a career mentor. We assign them one when they come if they don't have one already identified. And hopefully they'll then find organically a relationship that maybe fits better for them once they kind of settle in. It's in their offer letter before they even join the university. So there's been a lot of ways that we've underscored to new faculty that we care about this, that we want to make sure that their onboarding process, so to speak, includes some a connection with mentorship. January is National Mentoring Month. I'm sure all of you knew that. I don't remember how I found that out. Again, too much time on Google probably. But it is, and I've used that as an opportunity to kind of underscore again the importance of mentoring. This year we've invited in Angela Byers-Winston, who I know is involved in the Mentor Training Corps as part of a group called National Research Mentoring Network I'll tell you about. And she's going to be talking about, well, you can see the title there, Race Matters, Building the 21st Century Clinician, Educator, and Scientist. Part of kind of connecting mentorship up with the efforts that we've made at the university around diversity and inclusion. Other things that we're doing actually for clinician teachers this year, we have on conversations on skill building with clinician educator mentors and pairs as well. So I know there's a lot of discussion about clinician teachers, the challenges of mentorship for that group as well, and we've tried to focus on that a little bit with our Academy of Medical Educators. I understand you're starting to get that similar sort of academy started here as well. The second piece is recognition, again, like the Wayne Award, very, very important. And we've done this in a variety of ways. I'm going to apologize for the latter here. I have to get rid of it, but it was a pretty picture. But really just to remind me to tell you that for us, mentoring counts in advancement promotion. Our academic personnel manual, our promotion committees, it says teaching and mentoring, teaching and mentoring. So if you're spending your time mentoring, that gets looked at, that counts, and we ask faculty to not ask them, we require them to document their mentoring relationships on their CV. So the committees can see that. What kind of mentor, were they a research mentor, a career mentor? What's the context? Was it in the K Award? Was it career mentoring? And where is that mentee today? Still mentoring them? Are they now, the chair of department somewhere thanks to your mentoring 10 years ago, et cetera? So that's information that the committee will see, and we ask for the faculty to supply letters that attest to that mentor's competency. We also have a Lifetime Achievement and Mentoring Award. This is for the entire university. I think it's probably turned into the most competitive and most prestigious award on campus, interestingly. We get generally 20 or so very high quality nominations. Last year, we generally only gave one, but last year we were so conflicted that we gave two because we loved both of these companies and we were afraid they wouldn't reapply. It turns out Dr. Perestable, who was a former chief of DGIM, when I called him up to tell him he won, he said, "I've got news for you too. I'm going to NIH to take over NIMHD," and I ended up taking his job. But it was he and Zena Verb last year. This turns into a really nice celebration of mentorship on campus. We have our chancellor come and say a few words. And again, it's just part of changing the climate. We did this initiative a couple of years ago, 6 words about your mentor. Pat, if I remember correctly, I think this one might have been about you, that she secures my rope and I climb. But I remember this beautiful one was submitted by one of your mentees. But this, again, is a nice way of having mentees have an opportunity to recognize their mentors. For some reason, we had the idea of putting these in fortune cookies, and I just handed out fortune cookies for months after that. These very nice little sayings about mentors in them. It was a very sweet thing that maybe we'll do again. But again, little things like this turn into really nice ways of underscoring the importance of mentorship on campus. There's a variety of ways we've tried to do mentor training, right? So if we're going to say mentoring is important, we expect you to do it. It's going to be part of the promotion process. We need to have some way of training people up around mentoring. I did go to Sumo. I wish I took this photograph. I didn't. I can't claim credit for this one. So we've done some work in this area. This paper, published in the American Journal of Medicine a few years ago, came from our qualitative analysis of these letters of nomination for the Lifetime Achievement and Mentoring Award. We want to see what are the qualities, what are these mentees describing when they're nominating their mentor for this award. And it's the stuff you might imagine, but important to kind of keep in mind. Very basic is time commitment, but it's often the one that makes mentoring relationships fail in our setting. So if you're a mentor, you want to make sure before you say yes to mentor somebody, you truly have the time to devote to that. And part of that is getting more specificity about what is it that you want me to be doing for you over the next year or two. Is this career mentoring? Is this research mentoring, et cetera? Because you're not doing your mentee any favors by saying yes when you actually don't really have the time to devote to that relationship. Of course, these personal qualities are important, being enthusiastic, altruistic, trustworthy, etc. Supporting personal professional balance emerged from these letters. Most of these winners were very intensive, high-powered research mentors. But in all of the winners, and most of the nominations, the mentees were mentioning how that mentor was there for them and brought up and made room for and acknowledged both good and bad things that came up in their personal life, whether it be, happy events like babies or sad events like deaths or illness that might interfere with their professional life. And that kind of made them rise above the better than average mentor. And then finally, obviously, expertise in content methods and communication skills. again, you're not doing the mentee any favors by agreeing to mentor them in an area that you actually don't really have the skills to do so. This comes up, this is often an issue with more junior faculty who are maybe transitioning from mentee to mentor, want to start taking on mentees. The question often is, when am I ready to start doing that, and in what context? And so the kind of mentoring, the junior mentor piece of advice is making sure that you really have the expertise to do so, or form a team, do that in collaboration with a more senior person as well. It's a nice way to learn, right? No better way to learn stuff than to try to teach it to others. But you want to make sure you don't get stuck in a situation where you've taken on a mentee where you can't help them succeed because you don't know what they need you to know. This is a quote from one of these letters. During the launching of my career, she was like a solid rocket booster, ensuring that I achieved the lift and trajectory to make it into orbit. But rather than dropping off at that point, she has remained a constant feature like mission control, monitoring my progress. Just one word, and I can have 30 slides on the importance of mentoring diversity and inclusion. This is a well-known study from Science, published in Science a couple of years ago by Ginther, that showed that there's implicit bias in evaluating R01 grants at the NIH level. That if you're an African-American applicant, you're less, and everything else being equal, you're less likely to get the award than if you're not. This shook, as it should have, NIH, and has led to them putting a significant amount of resources behind the National Research Mentoring Network down here, and you can Google nrmn.com, I think, and see this is a large grant from NIH. It's got multiple components, including mentor training core. There's a professional development. They use Mentor Match, actually, to try to match nationally mentors with mentees. They're looking to, for example, match up mentees from HBCUs with mentors from research-intensive places so that they can get appropriate mentoring from a distance. I haven't talked about that as one of the competencies, but it's clearly what many of us do as distant mentoring as well. So if you're interested, particularly around mentoring for underrepresented minority faculty or trainees, I encourage you to look into the NRMN, and I can talk to you more about that after. We published in the area of what are the competencies or skills of successful or unsuccessful mentoring relationships, published this paper in Academic Medicine a couple of years ago, qualitative study at UCSF and University of Toronto. These are the things that came out from the reports of what made your relationship successful. One was reciprocity. It's got to be a two-way street. Can't just be a one-way giving relationship. It's just going to just burn out. Mutual respect, clear expectations, as I went over in detail earlier about setting guidelines from the beginning about goals and expectations. Some kind of history or personal connection, and some sense of shared values. On the flip side, what characterized the failed relationships in this study? Poor communication, lack of commitment, personality differences, competition or conflict of interest, which is clearly, I think, a very uncommon but can be a very big issue, and then lack of experience, knowledge, or skills. A couple of quotes from this study. The role of the mentor, I think, is really to be a guardian angel that prevents you from getting hit when you know something is falling from the sky, keeps you out of trouble, and makes the environment suitable for you to grow. And one other quote, mentors need to be guides, but also be sensitive to the difference between a guide and somebody who forces the mentee into a particular path. Deborah and I were talking about this on the way over. Having spent a year in Japan, there's a very different, kind of more hierarchical, patriarchal, I guess, approach, since most of the senior mentors are men in Japan currently, towards mentorship that can work in some sense as kind of that protection and advocacy role. But really the role of the mentor, I think, more in our culture is to help that mentee move towards guided independence. And part of the skill of the mentor then is knowing when you need to be guiding more and stepping back at other times. And it's going to depend on the situation, it's going to depend on the particular mentee, etc. And either extreme, some mentors kind of take the sink or swim approach, and others may take that micromanagement approach. And generally, for most of us, somewhere in between there is a sweet spot in terms of the appropriate approach towards mentoring. I had mentioned our CTSI, which is our Clinical Translational Science Institute, started a mentor development program a number of years ago. Pat had helped co-teach a session there on diversity or mentoring across differences, as well, perhaps others. This was our first cohort. I showed this Dr. Inadami, who's the chief of GI, was in our first cohort there in the middle. And and we're starting to put more of it on the web. This is a 10 case-based. The best way to really learn about anything probably is to use case examples and case discussions. You all have a wealth of experience as well. One way to start kind of improving everyone's competency is just to get together and talk about the cases, situations that you've had as mentors and how you've handled it. That's mainly how we've done these sessions with some didactic materials. It's half a day over 5 months. We give people a nice plaque they can hang on the wall at the end, which is always a nice thing to do. And we've trained more than 100 folks over the course of the last 9 years or so. And then finally, some assessment. Mentoring matters, and mentoring counts, and we expect you to do it. We need to have some sense of assessment. There's really nothing out there. We've created a 14-item instrument to allow mentees to evaluate their mentors. I hope to have it in the peer-reviewed literature soon. But you can also, even just have the global question, overall, are you satisfied with your mentoring relationship? That's probably good enough to get a sense of whether that relationship is working or not as you start trying to calibrate what you're doing. And of course, some program evaluation, you want to know what you're doing and you want to disseminate it. As we did the mentor development program and found that these, skill building, these mentors, now we didn't ask their mentees, mind you, but self-report from the mentors said that they had more confidence, more knowledge about mentorship, and more confidence in their ability to be effective mentors up to 3 years after completing the program. So it seems to make a profound difference, at least in their self-assessment of their approach as mentors. As you implement the program, I certainly didn't expect to bring everybody up to my expectations about mentorship, all divisions or departments or all mentors. You want to, in some ways, you've got a cohort of folks here who are really interested in this, have really drunk the mentoring Kool-Aid, want to work on it, and start with some models of excellence in your department, and bring that forward and nurture that while you start setting expectations for at least some minimal level of requirement around mentorship. So we still have some departments, you can probably guess who they are. The university, where they've been a little slower to come along and it requires more nudging and more meetings on my part with the department chair. Others, like your group, I think, are eager to go, and you just need a little structure and a little administrative support. So I want to put 2 quotes, and I've left a few minutes for questions. One is from the business world, because in fact, they figured this out way before we kind of got wind of this mentoring thing. I was telling Deborah early on when I was asked to start the mentoring program, I was looking in the health sciences literature. There was nothing. There was virtually nothing there about mentorship. A few articles. I was reading the Harvard Business Review. There's a robust literature or organizational psychology literature on mentorship and the importance of mentorship in those work environments. So we have a lot of catching up to do. This is a quote from Jim Collins, of course, of the book Good to Great, who said, for in the end, it's impossible to have a great life unless it's a meaningful life. And it's very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. And I would argue to have meaningful work without mentorship as part of that work. And my final quote, one that I love, from John Gardner, who is the founder of Common Cause, again, coming back to this idea that mentoring helps you to define the meaning of your work and your life. And he wrote, meaning is not something you stumble across like the answer to a riddle or the prize in a treasure hunt. Meaning is something you build into your life. You build it out of your own past, out of your affections and loyalties, out of your own talent and understanding, out of the things you believe in, out of the things and people you love, and out of the values for which you are willing to sacrifice something. So thanks a lot. I think we have a few minutes for or comments.
So you, in is it a one-on-one relationship, or do you have mentoring committees for assistant professors?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You know, oh, I forgot already. You just told me to repeat the question. So for those of you who are not here, I guess couldn't hear that. So the question is, do we have one-on-one? Have we promoted one-on-one mentoring, kind of dyadic mentoring, or do we do it by kind of mentoring committee? And I'd say it's been, what I promoted is dyadic, so mentor-mentee pairs, wanting each assistant professor to have an identified career mentor. Several of the departments have also formed committees and have used that as well to try to accomplish some of the aims, or group mentoring. So we have some divisions that have grown very heavy on the junior faculty end, like our Division of Hospital Medicine, that has just exploded in growth and has a very small handful of senior faculty and a lot of assistant professors. To try to form this dyadic relationship for all of them was impossible. So they've done a lot of it through group mentorship, peer mentorship, to try to get it done. And then they've looked for the career mentors, a dyadic relationship, perhaps outside of the division, within the department. That can work also. But I think there is value to have that one-on-one relationship, that kind of trusted career mentor. At the same time, I encourage people to form these mentoring teams. The other thing I'll say about that is that some of the departments that have used these committees have very much aligned it around the advancement promotion process. So the committees then will kind of meet with the chair and this kind of thing, which I think is logical on one level. Sorry, but I won't answer it. But on the other hand, I think part of the value of this career mentoring, this dyadic, is the trust and safety of having someone you can talk to about uncertainties. It'll stop in a second. The uncertainties in their career, etc. And if you align it too much around advancement promotion, although it seems logical with this committee, then that reports up to the chair, it's serving a different kind of purpose, I think, than a dyadic career mentoring relationship. Good purpose, but a different kind of purpose.
What's your practice once a person is promoted from assistant to associate?
Yeah.
To that next level,
Yeah.
Is it expected? Is it choice? I mean, how do you?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It came up yesterday as well, and I know apparently at least so once someone's promoted, the question is what do we do for the associate professors? Basically, once the mentee is promoted to associate professor, and nothing right now except worry a lot about them. And I know there was a session put on here, I heard, maybe it was through the Department of Medicine, on you've been promoted, now what? And I think with the current funding climate and everything else these days, I think the assumption in the past was you've made it to associate, you've made it. You can figure it out now, and that's clearly not the case. And you need more than one R01 to support your research career, etc. If you're in research. And clinician educators, I know often when they hit that point, it's now like I want to apply to be the program director, didn't get that job. Now what do I do, and how do I move along? So we're trying to figure it out. It was mostly a resource issue. We have 900 assistant professors. They're the most vulnerable group. We're trying to do career panels and other things to try to address the needs of the associate professors, but there's more and more talk of trying to set up more formal mentorship for them. So I don't know. I think it's something I'll have to think about because it's a really important question. I don't know. All I see is back to meeting, schedule, and join. No. Nothing. Well, thank you very much. One more. Yeah.
I think in the past, we gave people time to sort of settle in, and so we didn't appoint mentorship until you had been here long enough to what people call acting status.
Yeah.
Now move the other way, but I'm curious as to your thoughts about at what point do you think it's the right sort of, we have a limited resource, we don't want to misapply, but we don't want to let people go too long without something. So.
Yeah. So the question is, when's the appropriate time to pair someone up or encourage them to get mentoring? And it is a resource issue. I we do it right from the get-go. So it's in the offer letter. So when I'm now as division chief, when I'm making an offer to a new potential faculty member, in there I say, and your mentor within the Division of General Internal Medicine will be Dr. So-and-so. And I also, again, send letters to all new faculty at UCSF, junior faculty, when they join, saying, welcome to university. Here's your mentoring facilitator. They're going to help you find a mentor from day one. This is not just, anecdotal, but I get a lot of nice emails back from these faculty saying, basically, thanks for noticing that I arrived. And in the past, I think faculty often felt kind of overwhelmed and lost. Our onboarding process in general was terrible. It's much better now in a variety of ways. But I think the mentoring component is a really important piece of it. So I think right from the get-go, in my experience, is really, even though it takes more resources, it's been really important to help people feel right from the beginning kind of included and valued. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.